Hello, in this video we're going to be talking about diabetes mellitus, which is more commonly known as just diabetes. In diabetes, the pancreas cannot regulate your blood glucose levels. Worldwide, 1 in 11 adults is affected with diabetes. Now there's two different types of diabetes. We've got type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes, and we're going to discuss the differences between these two types. So here I've made up a table, and up the top here we've got type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes. Now, type 1 diabetes affects about 10% of people that have diabetes, and type 2 affects about 90% of people that have diabetes. So type 1 is much more rare than type 2. Now, the age of diagnosis means at what point you were diagnosed with having diabetes. Now, for type 1 diabetes, it's generally diagnosed between about 12 and 20 years old. But for type 2 diabetes, the age of diagnosis is generally over the age of 40. So it happens a lot later in life. Now, what happens in type 1 diabetes? Well, in type 1 diabetes, your pancreas, specifically your beta cells, stop making insulin. And we know that insulin is what causes glucose to go into the liver cells and to go into the muscle cells. But what about type 2 diabetes? What happens here? Well, here in type 2 diabetes, your pancreas produces less insulin than needed. So you're basically not making enough insulin, plus your cells become resistant to insulin. So it's almost like they're immune to the effects of insulin. Now, how do we treat type 1 diabetes? Well, treatment is simply by injecting insulin. So people that have type 1 diabetes must inject insulin every time they eat a meal. Now, for type 2 diabetes, treatment often involves a healthy diet, exercise, plus injecting insulin and taking medication which makes your cells take up insulin with ease. So it makes your cells less resistant to insulin. So this is the difference between type 1 and type 2 diabetes. So let's discuss a little bit more about type 1 diabetes. So that's the one that only affects about 10% of people. So type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disease. That means that your immune system attacks your beta cells, and unfortunately it ends up destroying most of the function of your beta cells. Now remember, beta cells make insulin. So if you don't have beta cells, you can't make insulin. And if you can't make insulin, then glucose cannot go into your liver cells and muscle cells. And remember, glucose is so important for our cells to function because glucose gets converted to ATP. So if glucose cannot get into your cells, you cannot have any ATP production. Therefore, people with type 1 diabetes must inject insulin, and they inject insulin with every meal. And they need to constantly check their blood glucose levels to make sure they're not too high or not too low. So now let's discuss type 2 diabetes. In type 2 diabetes, the cells in the body resist the effects of insulin, so they become resistant to insulin. So there's a combined effect here. The pancreas does not produce enough insulin, and this is generally related to lifestyle factors, which is why it can often be treated with a healthy diet and exercise. So now let's discuss a few graphs which quite nicely depict blood glucose levels in non-diabetics and in people with diabetics. So this is the first graph. And in green here, we've got the blood glucose level of a non-diabetic. So me, I'm non-diabetic, so I'm not injecting insulin. And here in grey, we've got meals. So the first one is breakfast, then lunch, then we've got the evening meal, and then here they're sleeping. Breakfast, lunch, evening meal. So this is over the course of 2 days. So at this point here, we can see that blood glucose levels have gone up. Now what that means is, at this point as well, insulin is being produced. So the insulin is produced, blood glucose levels also go up, then they go back down because your liver and your muscle cells are taking in the glucose. Then here you have lunch. So again, your blood glucose levels rise up. And at the same time that they're rising up, insulin is also being made. Then your glucose goes into your muscle cells and your liver cells, drops back down, and again here you have dinner. Goes back up, insulin is being produced, and then they go back down. And this cycle is repeated every day to try and keep your blood glucose levels at a healthy level. So just remember, whenever blood glucose levels go up, insulin is also produced. So wherever here I've drawn these black lines, that is when insulin production would be the highest. This is a non-diabetic person. They don't need to inject insulin. Their beta cells are producing insulin. Now let's look at another graph. Here we've got 3 different graphs here. Again in green, we've got a non-diabetic, just a healthy person. Here we've got someone that has type 2 diabetes, but they're treating it. And how are they treating it? By injecting insulin. And they are injecting insulin with every meal. And here we have an untreated type 2 diabetic. That means it's someone that's not And here we have an untreated type 2 diabetic. And here we have an untreated type 2 diabetic. That means that they don't realize that they have diabetes. They don't realize that they need to be injecting insulin with every meal. So the cells in their bodies are becoming slightly resistant to insulin, or perhaps they're not making enough insulin. So let's compare these 3 graphs. So again, here in green, we've got a non-diabetic. So they eat a meal, blood glucose goes up, goes back down. Up, down, up, down. Here in yellow, we've got a treated type 2 diabetic. So treatment means that with every meal, they're injecting insulin. So with every meal, they inject insulin. And you can see that their blood glucose levels go up and then back down, up and then back down, up and then back down. Now here we have an untreated type 2 diabetic. So here they have breakfast. They're not injecting insulin. Blood glucose goes up, up, up. Now it does drop because not all of the cells in your body need insulin to take up glucose. Only the cells that have the insulin receptor, which are your muscle cells and your liver cells. So blood glucose levels will drop a little bit, but not back down to a normal level. Then when they eat again, blood glucose goes up, goes down a little bit. Then they have dinner, it goes up and then drops. Now you can see that it's already much higher than when we started. And this will continue to occur and get worse and worse and worse. So now finally, let's compare someone that has treated type 2 diabetics. And again, treated means they are injecting insulin with every meal. And here we have a treated type 2 diabetic who missed lunch. They didn't eat anything. So if we look at day 1, just day 1, we can see that it's very similar. But now when we look at day 2, we can see here in purple that the treated type 2 diabetic who missed lunch, their blood glucose levels get dangerously low. Now this is very dangerous because they can faint, their bodies are not working efficiently. So then when they have their evening meal, it goes back up again. So this video discussed diabetes and also compared different graphs of diabetes.